Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. As you can see today, we're co-hosting this. I have a former CHRO, that's Chief Human Resource Officer, and HR expert, Christi Green, that's going to be on this call with me. And we're going to talk about really some of the most pressing issues that are coming up with HR and employee engagement. And Christi, you actually did a survey with a number of professionals that you've networked with throughout the HR area. And I thought we could touch on that and then specifically really talk about retention, but reeling it way back to the beginning around onboarding. So I'll let you jump in at this point.
Good morning. Yes, I think when I sent out the survey to my colleagues to say, what's keeping you up at night? I wasn't really that surprised when I got back really this thread of retention right now, because it's such a struggle to hire employees right now. And to me, the thread that runs through retention is engagement. And engagement ultimately starts right from the beginning when that person that's potentially interested in a position that you have at your organization sees your advertisement or hears you on the radio, right? And ultimately says, I want to work there. I want to look into this more to say, what are they going to offer me?
Yeah. And along those lines, it's interesting because one of the recent surveys that I saw was that about a third of employees will leave the organization that they're hired with within the first 90 days. And when we were talking about this earlier, I think in regards to retention, right? The foundation has got to be built on the onboarding, and you're talking about bringing it way back to really even the advertisement that goes out is really where the onboarding process starts. And I think it's not something that most people would think about. You think onboarding is, well, they've accepted the job, they're showing up for the first day, and that's when we start. But really, if we really wanted to get a hold on this thing and create an environment where we not only attract the best people, but we then develop and retain them, it does have to get dialed back to, as you said, even the ad, how we position the position and what is going to be expected. But I think the next part is, what about in the interview process? What has to happen there?
Well, ultimately, too, it also gets dialed back to what's your vision, your mission, and your values for your organization. Because if you're putting that out there, that's what you attract, right? When people see if this is the vision, this is the mission, these are the values of this organization, I want to be a part of that. If that's in your advertisement, and then the minute that recruiter picks up the phone and talks to you, that's initially the first contact. Continued engagement within that interview process to say, how do we actually want to bring you into the organization? How do we want to show you who we are? That true and employee value proposition.
Yeah. Now this will be for our next episode of this when we talk about retention once somebody's on board. I had to chuckle there for a minute because I remember working for an organization. I was working with them and I was working with their executive team, and they had an incredible set of values. They had 6 of them. They were on this really these beautiful poster boards that they had created, and they were in the hallways, they were in the boardroom. The problem is that nobody felt as though the values were being adhered to, that they had these beautiful values. And I really, as I read them, I thought, boy, this is a company that I'd love to work for. If you do these things, I want to be here. So I think to your point, right, when you read about those things, you're like, boy, this is a company. Yeah, I'd love to interview with this company and see if I can get in here. But then the next part is you actually have to follow through on what those values are. So we won't talk about that today, but I think that's something that's so important, right, is alignment with the values. So we move on from maybe the interview, right, where we're talking about those values and getting a sense that they're still in alignment with people. But what are the things that we can do when somebody shows up on day one in regards to onboarding that might be missing now?
Day one, as you've already said, that first 90 days is the most important 90 days of any employee's opportunity at the company to understand, again, who we are and what we're going to offer you. That welcoming committee whatever that looks like, right? You got to be careful not to be over the top and a little bit crazy. But at the same time, if I show up on day one, I have no idea where to go, and I get lost just trying to get from the parking lot to the front door. And then there's literally no one standing in the lobby waiting for me to show me where to go. That first impression really doesn't work for me, right? It doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy on the inside so
Yeah.
that I want to continue. To your point, then we walk down a hall that where all these values are displayed, but I'm walking by myself. I mean,
Yeah.
how does that work, right? So the making sure that there's clear communication about where I'm going on the first day, clear signage about where I'm coming to arrive to on my first day, and that my, as much as possible, maybe there's one colleague from the department, maybe it's my boss that meets me on that first day and spends the first hour hanging out with me, right? Giving me a tour, helping me understand, do we live those values that are hanging on that wall?
Yeah, it's almost like a buddy system when you
Totally.
start out. And it's interesting because I know we've had this conversation many times, and I talk about a lot, this model called SCARF,
Yes.
which are these 5 social needs that I believe we all have. And one of them is around relatedness. And I think to your point there, right, is that when I show up on day one, if I show up on day one and I'm like, boy, nobody has really been that inviting to me. I start questioning, I think at that point, like, did I make the right decision? And I think about that. There was some other data that I've seen recently around, it was an employment agency that had surveyed people that had left an organization, as part of this great resignation. And I think it was close to 40% of the people that were surveyed, and it was about 2,000 individuals that were questioning if they made the right decision.
Yes.
Should they have left the organization they were before? And I think, again, it speaks to that, how powerful it is on day one to make
Yes.
people feel as though you are part of this organization.
Yeah, no question. I think that ultimately organizations have a huge opportunity to either get this right or really get this wrong.
Yeah.
And in this day of, as you just mentioned, this great resignation, which again, you and I have talked a lot about this, and this isn't new. It just now has a new title. From my perspective, I've been doing this, 20 years, and the great resignation has been happening for many, many years.
Yeah.
It's just not had a big title. So we have an opportunity as whatever organization we belong to engage that person right from the start. And if you want to keep them because it's so hard to hire people right now, this is your opportunity to do so. This is the one big tip. What are you doing to figure out how to engage that person day one? And then it does need to continue on week 1 and
Yeah.
week 10, right? It isn't just day one. You've got to keep that going.
Yeah. And I think about it in terms of, right, we always hear our employees are our most important resource or our most valuable asset. Well, if that's the case, then wouldn't you want to start out from a place where you're making sure that the foundation is set, so this investment that you have in this individual, it develops.
Well,
Right?
and it's exactly right. This is a full investment. We know that turnover is 1 to 1.5 times that person's salary to lose them.
Yeah.
So if you've already lost a person and you have a position open, now you hire someone new and they leave within that first 90 days. Well, then in the first 6 months of that position, you've lost 2 people and you've now lost 2 to 3 times the annual salary. That's a huge financial nut that people can crack.
Yeah.
To be able to say, how do we do this better?
Yeah. And along those lines, I think, well, okay, so if a third leave within the first 90 days, how many people that, what percentage of it, and there is a percentage, I'm sure, that they don't leave in the first 90 days physically, but again, they've left emotionally and intellectually, maybe they've checked out because they're like, I can't leave this organization too. I've got to stay here, but they're not engaged anymore. And we know from some of the data out there, what does a disengaged employee cost an organization? And a couple of the numbers that I will often see is it's anywhere from $13,000 to $15,000 a year per disengaged employee. And also that for each percentage point, I think that you can move engagement in a positive direction, you have the potential to increase revenue by 2 to 3%. So there is
Yes.
this really is an investment that not only is it the right thing to do, but it pays in regards to organizational excellence, whether it's through culture or through financial benefits.
Engagement is a continuum. It
Yeah.
starts from that first ad. It ends with offboarding, which is an important topic that I think
Yeah.
we'll talk about it, in this series as well. And a lot of people are saying, I don't know really what that means, but we'll get around to that. I think ultimately that continuum, if engagement equals retention, retention equals productivity, productivity equals financial stability.
Yeah.
And right now, in coming out of this pandemic, I mean, I guess we're coming out of the pandemic, but the world has changed, and we have to figure out differently how we're going to retain those people.
Yeah, I would agree. I've thought a lot about in regards to onboarding, and one of the things that I've tried to promote out there is some type of leadership development as part of onboarding for everybody, right? And I think the important thing, or the way that I look at it, it's almost like it's like a leadership light, so to speak, that it provides people with an opportunity to identify what behaviors work well within the culture of the organization. If we can get everybody to at least understand what those are in the very beginning, what the behaviors are that we want to promote within this organization, I do think it provides new hires an opportunity to see, how can I behave here in a way that is going to, I think, promote my development as well, and my ability, my opportunity to grow.
Well, and in those behaviors, you're also building, from that engagement perspective, they're seeing that again on day one, we're willing to invest in you.
Yeah.
That creates in me a sense of belonging, right? To sort of come back to your cables structure, right? It's showing appreciation that I'm now here in this organization and that I'm going to belong over time.
Yeah. And I do think it provides an opportunity for, if you start with some type of leadership development as part of your onboarding process, to me, as I look at it, right, you can talk about um, productive conflict. How do we communicate in a way that we navigate conflict? And I would think from a standpoint of starting out within an organization, if I have disagreements with people around me, if I'm given some type of training in terms of how to develop that ability to deal with different personality styles and navigate conflict, or also to maybe advocate for myself or to drive my own development. I think right from the get-go, right as part of onboarding, it's not just about filling out your benefits package and your 401k and my direct deposit. I think there's such an opportunity here, as you've talked about, in terms of onboarding is our foundation, that probably we don't do enough in that area. We think, let's just get them on board and they'll figure it out. And it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. And it makes me think about recently I had a CEO ask me, what is the blind spot of a CEO from the perspective of a chief human resources officer? I said, well, I don't know that you're going to love my answer, but it's your people. I would tell you that you investing in the people on day one, you acknowledging those people on day one, and then throughout again, that continuum demonstrates that those values on the wall are lived by everyone from the CEO down, right? Or any other structure that will help them understand this isn't just an organization where leaders sit in the quote ivory tower, the executive suite, right? They're walking around, they are seeing what's going on out there so that you can understand your people. Your customers are not the people, while they're the people that bring in your money physically, the people of your organization are the ones who are actually the revenue generators, because
Yeah.
without them, you don't have a business.
Right. I mean, and it doesn't matter what it is, right? If you think of healthcare, you don't have a hospital without all of the people that from housekeeping to security to, the providers.
Correct.
You've got a building and great technology, but you can't treat patients.
and know when
It,
to run them, right? No,
yeah.
right, right. And you need somebody that's going to be able to walk through those doors, and you're welcomed, right? Again, it's no different from the customer being welcomed by an employee that gives them a smile when they walk through that door. It's the same for a brand new employee on day one.
Yeah.
Walk through the door.
Yeah. What would you think about this? And again, if we look at some of the data that's out there, not from a standpoint of probably the onboarding, but certainly later on when people leave organizations, or one of the biggest challenges that I think you mentioned in your survey was dealing with burnout, people that just have sort of lost it. And I've thought, as part of onboarding, even could you try and provide something up front, and not just an EAP number that people can call, but really some type of as part of your onboarding, resilience workshop in terms of helping them understand how do you navigate stress in stressful environments. Because let's face it, the world is stressful. We're going to have to deal with it, and we can't avoid it. So why not try and provide people with some tools in terms of how they can navigate it right from the beginning. And I think to your point that it shows to the employee, like, we care about you as an individual, and we're going to try and provide you with some tools here.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's incredibly important because, again, it demonstrates for that employee, oh, so they're acknowledging that there may be some stress in this job. We're not just making it a Pollyanna, hey, everything's going to be great for the next, however many years you want to be with this organization. We're identifying you may have some stressors that are going to come up in your job. So here are some tools and resources for you to help manage that.
Yeah.
And for us to help you manage that, right? To your point of leadership light, this is resilience training, as you mentioned a few moments ago. This is an opportunity for us to not only show them that EAP is available, but EAP isn't the only thing about your mental health and your mental well-being, right? So I really am on board with this term of well-being. It's not just about wellness, it's about well-being. And that is about a holistic process of the person in their entirety. Because whatever you have going on at home, you're going to bring that to work in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, without question.
So how do we help that person, first of all, acknowledge that you do that, right? And not try to say, leave your personal problems at the door, because that doesn't work. That just shuts an employee down.
Yeah.
Right. And, saying to them, how do we help you manage what's going on at home? Maybe it's financial well-being. Maybe they're so worried. They're to your point a few minutes ago, they have to quit. They don't like this job. They hate this job, right? It's not working for them, but they're going to quietly quit because they have to wait until they get a new job, because they cannot afford to not have some kind of a paycheck coming in, right? How do we help them financially understand with these programs that are out there to teach them how to manage a budget? There are a lot of people who are living paycheck to paycheck.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a whole great point that I didn't even think about. You're right.
Right. So how do we help them understand coming to work isn't just about a paycheck? It's about engaging that customer at the front desk. It's about caring for that patient in that bed, or in that X-ray room, or in manufacturing. Hey, I'm not just making a widget. I'm making it because someone on the other end of this is going to buy this and is going to help them in their life.
Yeah, those are great points. And again, the financial piece, I really hadn't even thought about, but what a great thing to provide people starting out in an organization where they're like, boy, this organization's thinking about more than, just what's best for them.
Right.
So we're going to do a series here, right? We've talked about the onboarding component of retention, but as we talked about, right, there are two other parts to this. One is, okay, now retention, what are the things that we can do when people are actually working within an organization? But I think the thing that people probably don't think about as well is how do you use offboarding to improve retention? And those are things that we'll hit on in the series. I think another thing that's important as well is this is not one-sided. This is not about what the employer needs to provide for the employee, or what the leader isn't doing. Because I think to be a leader at times, and especially the higher up the organization you go, and I know in my experience in dealing with executives, is that it's a lonely place at times where you feel like you don't have anybody to turn to, so you deal with some of these same things. I mean,
Mm.
there are heads of organizations that are burnt out and
Oh,
stressed
yes.
out, and we can talk about those as part of this series. But the next part that we're going to talk about is what do you do once people are on board, and now we're talking about keeping them here. What are the things that we need to do?
Yes. Yes. And I think that'll be, again, none of this is really new, right, Patrick? Like, this isn't revolutionary necessarily.
No.
It is about reminding organizations that this is going to be a new way to re-engage the people we have now. Offboarding can potentially re-engage people that used to work here and bring them back, right? Almost a like a springboard kind of a program, right? And but also, just because it's not new doesn't mean it's not important. So we need to
Yeah.
refocus on it, bring it back to life, bring it back to the forefront, and help organizations understand that we care about our employees and making sure that we give them what they need to be successful.
Yeah. What did I once hear somebody say that, and I don't know who it's from, but learning is remembering. And I think this is part of this, right? Is
Yes.
learning is remembering.
Yes.
So thanks for your time. I
Thank
think
you.
this has been valuable. I think onboarding is such an opportunity for organizations in the three parts that you've sort of broken out here. And I'm looking forward to having that next conversation on the next piece of this.